The only way to experience my beautiful experiment is while huddled in a fragile meat suit that requires constant food and protection. Hi, I'm Roger, and welcome to my latest creation, life. The only way to experience my beautiful experiment is while huddled in a fragile meat suit that requires constant food and protection. You can either scavenge and hunt in the wilderness, or you can scavenge and hunt in society, which is a nicer way of saying you can rob and murder. But don't worry, I've created a third option. Pages with faces drawn on them. If you have enough of these, you can exchange them for anything. Don't have any of these pages already because your parents were too lazy to inherit and pass along generational wealth? Don't worry. You can still get them just by doing stuff. I call it a job, and you'll need to have one pretty much every single day of your life until your fragile meat suit finally gives up. First, there's table jobs. Jobs where you sit at a table. You'll look in front of you and you'll push down at squares for anywhere from 1 to 2/3 of your entire day. It may sound repetitive, but the exact order in which you push these squares can make somebody, not you, an embarrassment of pages with faces.
When I finish pushing squares, I drive home and relax by sitting at a different table and pushing the same squares, but in a different order.
A well-earned rest. You might think it'd make more sense for you to press those work squares from your house and save a few hours driving from one table to another, and save your crotch from tightening uncomfortable cloth around it every morning. But the people who distribute pages with faces already committed their face pages to paying for a building full of tables. So they're damn well going to make sure you're sitting in it.
It's all right. The office is where I socialize and maybe even find love.
It's true. You'll sit so close to other meat suits, it'll feel like a butcher's fridge or a prison. You'll love talking with other table workers simply because though we plop you in the table room for 8 hours a day, we can never think of enough stuff to fill those hours.
But it's somehow worse than working.
It sure is, friend. So maybe you'll instead become a blue-collar worker, member of the working class. What do people like you like to be called? I don't want you to be offended.
Why would I be offended?
Because we all look down on anthropomorphic labor donkeys for some reason.
Hey,
What I'm saying is you can specialize in what I call hand jobs.
hey.
Jobs where you work with your hands. These jobs involve selling your body, but not in the fun, lucrative way, just in the low-paying, physically demanding way.
At least my job keeps me fit. Muscles grow when you strain them. All other parts of my body will deteriorate though. My neck, my back, my elbows. Damn it if I don't look good doing it.
And that's if you don't take a type of hand job that damages you extra.
Well, can you offer me any kind of protection from all that?
That's with us protecting you. Everyone thought robots would do all the exhausting, dangerous stuff by now. But aren't you relieved that didn't turn out to be the case and you still have your hand job? If there's any job we'll replace with robots, it's actually... people jobs. The kind where you deal with people. Maybe you take things from one side of the room and deliver them to the other side, like in a food place. Maybe you touch things with a machine so another machine can add up prices. It's a job so pointless, we increasingly just let customers do it themselves.
Hey, I am not that replaceable.
Even if the machines and apps we built to replace you aren't as good at the jobs as you are, people will still prefer them to you.
Because they're cheaper?
Oh, no, it's hard to get much cheaper than $7 an hour. It's because they don't like you. They forget anything good you do.
I'm not the bad guy here. It's the customers who are awful.
Of course, they're stressed out trying to wring the most out of what little time they have not working, all the while knowing within just a few sleepless hours they'll be back at their table or swinging a sledgehammer or dealing with horrific customers of their own in an Ouroborosian cycle of entitled sadness.
Well, there's got to be more to life than that.
There is. Maybe you'll find something creative, something that gets your blood pumping, something that truly leaves your mark on this world.
Like me, I love what I do.
For now. But the only way you can keep doing what you love is by commodifying it and turning it back into a job like everyone else's. You'll no longer choose to do it, you must do it. You no longer decide how to do it. You'll do it the way we tell you. We could hire you to sing songs to kittens while eating peanut butter cups, but give us 2 months, and we'll have you loathing every delightful minute.
Well, forget you then. I will do my act my way on this side until it finds an audience.
That's a great idea. All you'll need is some simple job, just temporarily to pay the bills for a little while, until your passion becomes a career.
That's what I did 20 years ago.
Hey, speaking of paying the bills, just how many face pages do you get for facilitating what we do?
Wow, way more than we give you. It's fair, though, because you're making as much as we let you think you're worth. Otherwise, you'd never agree to work. And like I said before, there are other ways of getting food. I've been Roger, by the way. And while you're out here job hunting, I'm hunting too, for the most dangerous game.
Man, oh man, that sums it up. What's going on? How y'all doing tonight? Here again, and I think that we should be live and in action. We got the good setup back. You know, I was traveling over the weekend, and so had some technical difficulty. But today, we look like we're ready to go. So appreciate you guys for coming through. Today is let's go with it. So today is January 14th, 2024. And it's so funny because I love the way that that YouTube channel explains just these simple things of life. How sometimes if we really, really, really think about it, for example, a job, we're basically trading our time, our bodies, our energy, giving everything for pieces of paper with faces on it. And it's pretty funny because at the end of the day, what is freedom really if you don't have the choice over much of your time? And, you know, I think that's one of the biggest things about being an investor or learning to just get financially educated, why it's so important, simply is towards the aspect of freedom. Because why live a life, you know, we spend so many years basically slaving away and spending time doing things that we don't like to do. So the biggest thing why I decided to get financially educated a long time ago and why I continue to do so is simply because I want more of my time back. And I love the fact of just educating on this matter is simply because, like, kind of when the veil gets lifted from your eyes, you're able to make the actual real life moves on a day-to-day basis, on a week-to-week basis, a month-to-month, and a year-to-year. And you don't have to wait till you're 70, 80 years old. Basically, where you can't even enjoy moving around that much because you're not physically able to say, hey, I'm retired. I don't have to go and work for all these pages with faces on them all day. You know, and so here on the channel, this is kind of what we're talking about. And today, this is going to be jam-packed with education. You know, today is the topic of understanding all of the ratios that are important to investors. And I mean, I'm talking about everything from understanding a Big Mac to $1, right? Did you even know that that's a ratio? Everything that has a price is a ratio. So we're going to discuss these matters, but then understand the aspects of where we need to be mentally to see things through. You know, I'm always talking about those aspects because they're so important. So appreciate you guys for coming through. Who we got in the chat? Let's get it. We got Dave T. Yes, my friend. It is time for some more alpha. So I'm looking forward to it as well. And yes, as y'all can kind of see, I'm rocking the Green Bay Packers. I believe they killed the Cowgirls today. They won, so kudos to them, and good luck to whoever has to play them next, because it seems like they're on a roll. So all you football fans out there, I hope you guys enjoyed the last couple of days. We had some pretty good games for sure. What's good? We got Wade in the chat. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. BFD gang. It's time. It's time. Let's see. And I mean, yeah, like at the end of the day, man, the plot twist is really it's eat or be eaten, truthfully. Like at the core of all of this stuff, it's hey, how much better can you do compared to the person next to you? Honestly, unfortunately, that's just how it is. So developing a competitive spirit, sometimes it's just like, no, I don't want to have to compete. I don't want to have to say I'm trying to do better than other people. Or you can just say, hey, I'm just trying to do the best that I can do. Okay, cool. At the end of the day, it's all about doing something, right? And then, so the more that you're doing, the more that you're actively going through the paces of, growing, the better chances that you're gonna give yourself for just general survival. I think that's the plot twist that really helps me understand why that video is so important, because at the end of the day, it's just like, hey, what can you do on this earth, and the tools that you're able to equip yourself with as you are walking this earth and hopefully growing in a positive direction. And okay, yeah, I'm glad y'all liked it. So, because that's one thing I'm gonna continue to incorporate more of entertaining truths. Sometimes people are like, man, I don't like the truth, or sometimes they're used to hearing lies, especially if you watch the media, the news, whatever the case is. But dealing in truth is the best and easiest way to get to the goal that you're trying to get to. And sometimes that's even dealing with truth within yourself. We're going to talk about that, because we're going to talk about the habits that we have and able to, be able to help us be good longevical investors. So as I kind of corroborate all of these thoughts together, I appreciate you guys coming for this presentation. This is going to be a lengthy stream. So if you got to take some time, watch half it today, watch the rest tomorrow, is what it is. But this is for those that want to advance their education. That's what it's all about. And as investors, we can't just say, hey, I just want to know what price is something and when am I going to make $1 million? You have to expound past that. And so that's what we do here at the Volts of Crypto. And we're looking forward to just jumping on in. So without further ado, let's see. I really want to start, which I have currently, is I have a whole list of what we're going to be talking about in particular. And so I think I'll go there first. And then we have plenty of charts to go through. So that'll be on the back end of the stream. But I kind of want to pose a couple of questions as we get started. So let's do it. So let's hop over real quick and we'll talk about this. So the main topic, and there's several subtopics, but the main thing is the main thing. So let's talk about this really quick. And for example, so what I have here, before we fully jump in, I have a whole list of things that are just packed full of just things to remember as we go through this bull market. And if you only watch the stream once, it's like, dang, I have to go back to this video to watch it. But here's the thing. If you guys join the Volts of Crypto group, you guys have access to this at a flip of a switch, basically. A touch of the finger. It's all in the Telegram. This will be, incorporated into the Telegram later tonight. And then so all of this good information, just core principles, things that help educate you guys, not just telling you, hey, what to buy or whatever the case is. Like, these are things that you're going to need, because I guarantee it. Investing is much more than just buying stuff. It truly is. And so that's the concept that we'll be going over. But in general, I do want to talk about this. The importance of understanding ratios. So we're going to go over, if not every important ratio, majority of the important ratios that cover not just crypto, but even looking at the global economic outlook, even understanding interest rates, understanding price wages to the average cost of a home, understanding a gazillion things, right? Short-term bonds versus investing in the stock market, or investing in gold versus Bitcoin. All these things we're going to cover. But at the crux of, what we're talking about, the biggest thing is this is something I want everybody to remember. The biggest fight we will ever have in a debt-based society is battling the devaluation of the currency and paying interest on money that is made out of thin air. I'm going to read that one more time. Uno más for those that didn't hear it the first time. The biggest fight, so that's you and me, the biggest fight that we will ever have in a debt-based society, that's where we're at now, is battling the devaluation of the currency, right? So that's things costing more no matter what, and paying interest on money that is made out of thin air. So here's the thing. As they're debasing the currency, they're making the money out of thin air, and then they're saying, hey, you want to use this money that we just created? Hey, you got to pay us back interest. Now, that's the double negative if you guys know just the basic math of it. And they're not giving us anything of value, right? And the biggest thing about understanding ratios is being able to capture good value at a good price, or whatever the case may be. So this is the big fight that we're here for, is to understand how to fight this fight well. And so it's going to take a lot. And so some of the subcategories of topics that we're going to get into, right, is the question of who is the compound interest going to? Is it going to the bank? So are you taking continual loans out, loan after loan after loan, or is the compound interest going to you, right? And then we need to get on the right side of interest and make it compound for us. So understanding how that works. Number 2 is, okay, so here's this thing here, right? Finance is literally a game, just like how there's a basketball game, a football game, soccer game, whatever it is that you're watching, there's many different aspects that go into it, right? So those that understand all of the aspects that go into it, guess what? Like, for example, hey, if I am playing football, I know how to run my route. Not only that, I know how to also catch the ball. Also that, I know how to make sure that I'm keeping defenders off me. I know how to read coverage, right? For example, for a football player, you need to know those things, especially if you want to play at a high level. If I know all those things, the chance of me having success against my defender is way higher versus if I can just only run a route. So in the same terms, for example, being able to understand certain financial terms, being able to understand ratios, percentages, right? This is going to give me a much better chance of doing well within finance versus me just basically knowing how to work and how to pay bills. So these are important things. So it's a game, right? And the key is we have to use choice, because we all have a million choices every single day. It's not like we wake up and only just make one choice. It's like choice after choice after choice. Our choices compound. But also with that is using applied knowledge or applied ignorance, because both can come in handy. Outside of that, we need to understand what do our habits look like. So our spending habits, our budgeting habits, our investing habits. And then also, if we can just understand the 8th grade math, like I said, percentages, addition, ratios. And the last factor of all this stuff within finance is time. Time is the most important thing. So if you guys can do those things, if you literally can say, hey, right, I'm going to be good at my choices. I'm going to use applied knowledge. I'm going to have good habits. I'm going to just learn some 8th grade math and just let time do its thing. It's like a 99% chance that you're going to do well with your finance. But only ignorance is the one thing that keeps people from being unsuccessful here. And so ignorance is nothing but not having the knowledge, or knowing the knowledge and choosing not to use it. So I'm not saying that people are just ignorant, but from the true definition is they're in ignorance because they're not doing something that they may know or they've been exposed to, or for the simple fact they haven't been exposed to information like this. And so the whole point of this channel, right, like I said, education, is we want to jump out of ignorance and jump into knowledge, right? And then so number 3, the biggest thing where I think a lot of people have a big problem when they're getting into say, okay, cool, I want to learn about something, but they're not issuing and dedicating enough time to it. So the question is, what are you doing in your spare time? Because the thing is, getting financially educated is, how not only you grow it, but maintain what you've grown. It's interesting, the fact that a lot of times in crypto, yes, you can catch a wave. But the thing is, what happens is you can catch a wave, but then how do you continue to know what wave to catch from there on? Or to know, all right, cool, I've already caught in this wave. It's time to go in. Let me go ahead and wait till next week when the swells are a little bit less, less friction, a lot less things that are going to make it, I would say, hard for me to be able to surf in these conditions. So understanding weather. So that's the thing, right? As a surfer, you must know how to get on that board, ride the wave, but also know, all right, the weather's bad. Let me get in the house. Let me go back to the shack. Let me rest. Let me go ahead and eat some food, replenish so I can have enough energy to ride the next wave the correct way. So I'm trying to give you guys these simple analogies that help you understand, okay, finance correlates to all these other things, and it's very easy to see. And the thing is, like, when you're getting financially educated, it's hard to just do it once or twice and be like, okay, I got it. Like, you legitimately have to go over it and over it and over it and over again. And so when you go over things multiple times, that's how things get deep rooted. Like, you can't get anything deeply rooted until you have like a firm foundation to be able to apply it. Because I think a lot of people have heard a lot of things, but the simple thing is it hasn't like rooted deeply into them to where they say, okay, cool, I actually want to go ahead and apply it and try to apply it not just once, but multiple times. Because it's kind of like a tree. For example, in order to even have a tree, the first thing you've got to do is dig a hole, right? So digging a hole is not easy, right? Especially if you want a big tree. So you got to dig a deep hole. So you got to go deep, deep down in there, and you got to plant that seed. But outside of that seed just being in the hole, you got to continue to water it time after time and time after again. So what does that water look like? That looks like DCAing time and time and time after again. Watching streams like this one, time and time after again, right? Actually saying, hey, I'm going to budget 15% of my income and turn that into investing or savings time and time after again. So applying this stuff over and over again is the only way you can get a big old 100-foot tree that just yields you fruit every single day. And it comes years down the line. It doesn't happen overnight, right? So the biggest thing is the way that you get to that big old tree is the biggest thing is how are you using your spare time? Are you using it on Instagram? Are you using it on, something that's only just giving you entertainment? Everyone has spare time. There's no person on this earth that doesn't have spare time. And if you don't, try to make some more, And so that's the third question for you. The next thing is subtopic is number 4. The biggest thing is when it comes to these ratios, we need to learn to capture the value in each ratio. So everything is a ratio, like I said before. If it has a price, it has a ratio. And if you have to give up time for it, it has a ratio as well, and that's so that's giving, hours for dollars, like how we're talking about. So a lot of these topics are super important. I appreciate the fact that, there's information out here to understand these things deeper. But what I've done here is I'm basically combining all this information together because before we get to these ratio charts, we definitely need to understand these basics. So, I think that now that we have the foundations, the core of what we're talking about, now this is the precipice of understanding. Now we can get into like the actual nuts and bolts and saying, okay, cool, let's see what this really means to me. Because at the end of the day, who cares if I know what the definition is? It's about how can I apply what I've just learned. All right, so here's the basics, right? So number 1, we need to understand compound interest. And 9 times out of 10, most people have compound interest working against them. And so let me paint this beautiful picture for you guys. And I'm going to try to do my best to show you that compound interest is something that everybody experiences. It can either go with you or against you. But hold on, let me see if I can put myself back on here. That way y'all can see the illustration real quick. All right, so I'm on here. So let's talk about this thing called compound interest. So compound interest. Now, the biggest thing about compound interest is that it can go for you or it can go against you. So let's say we're going to take Jim. Jim is a nice, hard-working man, young man. He's just graduated high school, and he's like, you know what? I want to go do something good with my life. So I've heard from a friend of a friend. I've also heard from my parents, from what they've told me, I need to go to school, go get a higher education. So guess what? Jim goes ahead and gets a loan. He goes to a nice, prestigious school that costs, $40,000, or let's just be a little bit more modest, $20,000 a year to go to this school. And this is going to be any standard 4-year university. So he does this 4 years. He goes in, let's say he gets his bachelor's in engineering. So something that's noteworthy. And after that 4 years, he's all right, cool. I want to go find a job. So now he's already $80,000 in debt. And he's probably, let's call it 22 years old. Okay. So, but his job is paying him, let's say $90,000, $100,000 a year. So he's doing pretty good. But guess what? With a nice high paying job, guess what he's going to want to go and do? He's probably want to go buy his first new car. So let's say he works that first year, makes that 100K. Okay, good job. Now outside of that, he buys this new car. Let's say this new car is 50K. Let's say he's like, you know what? I don't want to just use all my money. You know what? I probably, enjoyed a lot of my time making this money. Went on vacation, bought myself some shoes, bought all these clothes. I look good, all this kind of stuff. Because this is what the average person is going to do now. Now, let's say he doesn't want to use all his money. Let's say he only wants to put, let's say, $10,000 down on this $50,000 car. So with that being said, now he's another $40,000 in debt. And so the typical thing is, okay, so now he's 80K in debt, add another 40K, he's paying that off. He's got a nice job, but he's still paying that off. But all of that extra money that he borrowed, guess what? It's coming with an interest. So he had the opportunity potentially to just work and not have to pay any interest or not have to take any debt. But he chose this route. And this is what most people do. So now outside of that, guess what? Jim goes and meets Jane. And Jane is a beautiful, lovely woman. And they're like, okay, cool. I like you. She likes me. And let's go ahead and get married. So they both get married. And so the beautiful American dream, what happens next? Okay, they want to go and buy their first house. The average housing cost, and I looked at this earlier today, the average housing cost in the whole United States, and this is all 50 states, is about $315 or $315,000, excuse me. So let's say, you know what? They don't have $315K cash. So what are they going to do? They're going to go ahead and get another loan. Current interest rates for a 30-year mortgage sitting right about 6.5%. So now we're like, Jane or Jim has gone through this whole process of going through like 3 or 4 different loans. And by this time, he's probably just hitting his 30s. So what does this mean for Jim? Most likely, yeah, his pay being an engineer might have went from 100K to 120 to 140. But guess what? Those dollars that he's paying him, guess what? They're becoming worth less and less, right? Because they keep making more of them. So he's feeling like he's making more, but he's getting more debt. And he's like, dang, what is going on? I thought I was doing the right thing. But the compound interest is working against him every time he takes a new loan. And he doesn't understand what's going on. And so there's a big problem here that he's faced with is he now has to work till he's 60, 70. He might be able to pay all those loans off by the time he's like 50 or 60. And then by then you're 60 years old. You're just like, man, I don't even have any more energy. Like I want to go on vacation, but for what? I'm tired. My knees hurt, depending on what type of job you got. So, you got to ask yourself, is this a life that you want to live? Or if you're already in this route, how can you deviate from this route and get on the right side of compound interest? So let me give you guys a scenario of the positive side of compound interest. Okay, let's say Jim, cool, that's fine. Let's say he wants to go and get some additional learning out of high school. Okay, cool. Instead of going to a 4-year university, he might just go to a community college. Instead of paying $20,000 a year, he's maybe paying, let's call it, $5,000 a year. And community college is only 2 years. So, okay, cool. $10,000. Let's say he pays $5,000 out of pocket. The other $5,000, let's say he has a loan on. Cool. I think paying a loan on $5,000 is a lot better than paying a loan on $80,000. I think you would agree. Okay, cool. He can go and get any job. He can go work at McDonald's and pay that $5,000 loan off. He can do that. He can go and work at whatever he like, because the 2 years that he spent in school, let's say he did some classes for engineering. They weren't from the prestigious school of university, but he has the knowledge, right? So he can go maybe get a lower engineering type job. Instead of making 100K, cool. Let's say he's only making 70K, maybe even 60K. Guess what? His ratio, because here's the thing, his ratio is much better. He only has to pay off $5,000 and he's making 60. Versus Jim, the other guy, he's making 100K, but he's got to pay off 80. So that's a big deal. And so now the biggest thing that we must think about is, okay, now let's say for this other scenario, he goes and gets a car. Okay, cool. Now, see, he's making $60,000. It makes it a lot easier for him to save some money, right? Because he's not got to pay these crazy loans off. And he saves some time. He didn't spend 4 years. He did what people do in 4 years in 2 because he was serious about it. So now he's younger than Jim. Let's call this guy Rob. So Rob is younger than Jim. He has less debt than Jim. He's earning not as much, but he's still on the positive side of the ratio. So cool. Let's say he wants to go and get a car. let's say this car, instead of being $50,000, because Jim wants to go get that nice fancy car because all of his friends went and got that nice fancy car. Because it's about who he's hanging around with. You go to a 4-year university, you're going to be around some other people that want to have certain prestige as well. Rob is going to the everyday, community college. He's like, I don't really care. I'll just whatever can get me from A to B. So instead of paying $50,000, he's going to pay, let's call it $20,000. And you can still go get a nice used car for $20K. And let's say, because here's the thing, his ratio is still pretty good. He made $60,000, whatever the case is. Okay, let's say he puts down 10 and he takes another $10,000 loan. Okay, cool. So now, with that being said, he's got a $5,000 loan for school, $10,000 loan for his car, because those are like 9 out of 10s when you're like just coming up. Those are like the biggest purses that you're going to have. So now making $60,000, and let's say his increase in pay doesn't go up. So let's say $15,000 versus, a person that's okay. Now, Jim in that scenario, he's going to be $130,000 in debt. What ratio is better? Okay, cool. Now the best thing about this is, okay, cool. Now Rob goes and meets Rachel, whatever the case may be. And maybe Rachel's like him, doesn't have the best job, maybe don't make the most, but don't have a lot of debt. So they're not paying a whole bunch of interest on that debt. And she's just working her everyday job as well. But what happens if they decide to say, okay, cool, in this first year, we're working together before we buy a house and all this other stuff. Let's just pay off all our debt. So let's say he had his $15,000 in debt. Rachel, she had her $15,000 in debt. He makes 60. She makes, I don't know, 30, 35 minimum wage, somewhere in there. Guess what? For them to pay off their debt in conjunction, both of them together, it takes 1 year if they work together. So they work together. And they could have their apartment or whatever the case is, their living situation. They work together. They can pay off everything in 1 year. Why? Because the ratios are in their favor. But then let's say they say, okay, before we go buy this house, let's just take 20% of our income, and every single time that we get paid, we'll keep investing. We'll save some, we'll invest some. And they do that for 2 years. So what we find is, okay, cool. They can probably go get a house, but not just put down a little bit, but maybe put down a lot. So instead of only putting down their 10 or 20%, maybe they can put down 50, 60, or 70%. Take the loan on 30%. So what I'm doing here, I'm giving you the understanding of ratios and compound interest, because while they're investing for those couple of years, they're getting a return on those investments to be able to help them get that down payment versus only working and you're trading your hours for those, pages with faces on it, no investment. So y'all can kind of see the picture I'm painting here. Financially, Rob and Rachel are going to be 10 times better off for the long term versus Jim and Jane, simply because of choices. And so my plight today is to let's dive into the understandings of how this actually works, so that we can actually not only just cash in on these choices, but make it plain, make it easy, right? You can explain this almost like a third grader. So with that being said, I hope that little monologue helps you understand the principles and concepts here. So now getting into this concept, and let me kind of zoom in so that we can see this just that much easier. So compound interest. So the actual formula for compound interest. So A is equal to P in the parentheses 1 plus R divided by N to the power of NT. So what does that even mean? So A is equal to the future value of the money. So the amount that you will have in the future. P represents the principal, so the amount that you start with. R is going to be the annual interest rate. So how much is that principal making on a yearly basis? The N is going to be the amount of times the interest is compounded, per time period. So per year, how many times can you DCA is kind of what that says. And then T, the amount of time, usually in years, that, the money is either saved, invested, or borrowed. And then so, for example, the one that you want to stay away from is borrowing a large amount of money for a long time. What you'd like to do is save a large amount of money for a long time, or invest a little bit amount of money for a long time. The key thing is time, the T, is the amplifier in this whole equation. That I think that's the key that sometimes we kind of skip over, is because sometimes we want things to happen now. The T, because this is like raised to T. So this is a power. This is the multiplier effect versus doing linear math. And the parentheses is the multiplication as well, instead of just adding and subtraction. So that's the key. And then so the thing is, when we compound investing, so for example, not just invest once, but invest every couple of weeks when it's advantageous, or maybe once a month, or whenever you can, not just once a year or once a decade or never, but being active with it, you give yourself a chance to run this equation through and experience what happens from an equation like that. So for example, an equation that's going to be just linear math, it would just be 1 + 1 is 2. 1 + 5 is 6. But when you add time, it allows you to go exponential. So you're able to compound your DCAs through the years, which is going to give you the compounding nature. And this is what we also call that hockey stick moment. And so that's the key. We all want to get here, but what does it take? It takes this formula right here. So this is something like definitely write this down, memorize it. Like, you want to tell your kids this one day. They may not understand it as a young one, but as they're growing up, going through high school, because believe it or not, this is taught in 8th grade now. This is 8th grade algebra. So here's the thing, like that's what I was saying before. If we just take the time to realize that all of this stuff comes down to things that we probably learned before, but we've gotten away from it simply just because, we just felt like it's not important. And these things, if you want to be wealthy, if you want to have more time freedom, whatever your plan is or your goals are, you got to understand this 8th grade math. It's just plain and simple. So, okay. Now with that topic, like we talked about, finance is literally a game of choice, applied knowledge, and applied ignorance. Habits, knowing the 8th grade math, but then also time. So to kind of expound with that idea, at its core, it's indeed a game, of choices. And it's a delicate balance because, like, for example, when you wake up in the morning, you can either choose to hit the snooze 3, 4, 5 times, or try to create the habit of, hey, as soon as I hear my alarm, I'm gonna get up out that bed, right? It's easier said than done, but the more that you do it, it becomes easy. And so that just comes down to discipline. And frankly, how bad do you want to do it? I think a lot of times we set these standards for ourselves. We say, oh, we'd like to, or it'd be nice to, but when it comes down to actually doing something, we struggle, And so we have to have a big enough why. Like, what is the reason? Why do you want to do that? Because you have to see the benefit from doing it. If you're just doing it because somebody told you to do it, most likely it's like, I'm not going to stick with it for long. But if you have a big enough why, like, hey, if I do this, I can wake up and get my extra, 20 minutes in to prepare for my day. That means my routine is on time. That means my schedule's on time. That means I can get more done. So if you expound on that topic, you realize that, hey, there's actually great benefit in doing it versus like, oh, I'm tired. It's like that mental battle you have to fight in your mind. And you understand that your mind is going to be the most powerful thing in all of this, not just within finance, but just the everyday life. And then so, it's all about making informed decisions, right? We have to understand the difference between risk and rewards. But then again, we have to be able to make the choices that are going to help us choose the right path towards being financially healthy. So a lot of people want to talk about just the concept of being rich or the concept of being wealthy. Let's talk about being financially healthy. And what that means to me is being financially healthy is saying, hey, not worrying how I'm going to pay for this. Not worrying is, hey, am I going to be able to afford the light bill? Hey, am I net positive every single week? Am I getting more inflow than outflow? That's being financially healthy. Do I not have to rely on debt to get the things that I want? Financially healthy. Here's the thing. So this is where financial and applied knowledge comes into play. The only way that you can get healthy in anything is by doing the work first. Like, I think as babies are born, right, they rely specifically on the mother's milk, because of the nutrients, the health benefit, and that way they're able to grow. Because when we're humans, like the biggest growth that we all have experienced is when we're young kids. And then we stop growing as adults. And it's so crazy when I think about this is because, as we're growing as kids, we soak in information and we're more likely to, hey, give it a try, versus adults that have just been doing things for a certain way because of their habits. They don't like soaking in new information because it's like, oh man, I don't want to grow no more. I should be done growing. And the thing about finance and just in general, life in general, it's a constant effort of always trying to grow. But people are burnt out. And then so just like with anything, like the way that you can get healthy is you need the nutrients, right? The constant showering over your mind, your thoughts, and your emotions on being able to digest everything, to be able to get a good output, so to get the energy to do the things that you need to do. And so that's where knowledge comes into play, and spending time learning the things that you need to learn. And so on the other hand, applied ignorance. So this is another key concept. Applied ignorance is basically consciously ignoring the noise of the market. So something that's super interesting is with these Bitcoin ETFs. And okay, cool. Bitcoin is back down to 42,000 bucks. It went up to 49K. And everyone is like, oh my gosh, we're going into a bit like the biggest thing is the goal, right? Keep your eyes on the goal, which is devaluation of the currency. As long as you know that's happening, it does not happen. Like, it doesn't matter what happens to Bitcoin this next month, or Ethereum, or whatever coin that you're holding, because you're understanding, hey, if I hold on to this thing that has a limited supply or a specific use case or provides value to the market over a long time period, I know that it's going to creating more dollars that this thing is denominated in. So as long as I know that, I'm on sides. That's all you have to think about. That's it. So sometimes you have to, you legitimately have to, when I say ignore, like specifically ignore the stuff on Twitter or X.com, ignore half the people on YouTube saying, oh my gosh, woe is me. Ignore the moon boys that say, hey, this thing is going to go up 20x tomorrow. Buy now, right? Because investing is much more than listening to other people. It's knowing about the environment and how to facilitate a good, easy. And when I say easy, like DCAing is easy because it doesn't matter what price is most of the times, right? And so create an easy strategy for yourself, but you wouldn't know to do anything like that if you didn't understand what it takes. And so that's what we're talking about, is understanding, hey, what does it take to understand the landscape? So just ignore the short-term fluctuations is what it takes. Focus on the long-term financial goals. That's what it takes. But then again, like I said, there's also just the regular ignorance, where regular ignorance is just seeking, or I'll say this, regular ignorance is saying, hey, I'm okay with doing things the way that I'm doing them. I'm mad at the way that things are outside of me, like my external. I hate the fact that gas is so high. I hate the fact that, everything costs so much. And you're just going to sit around and be mad all day? Or just ignore it and be like, well, whatever. I'm just going to spend all day scrolling my phone, look at things that probably not going to help my situation. So you're doing all that. And at the same time, not trying to seek any new information that can help your actual life. Not the life that you're seeing other people live on social media or on YouTube or on X, but your actual life. Because guess at the end of the day, no one's going to care about your life more than you, than probably your significant other, and then your parents. Outside of that, most people probably don't care. And so you've got to do the decisions. You've got to do the research. You've got to take the time. You've got to listen. You've got to get out of ignorance and into knowledge to be able to, keyword, do. And in order to have financial health, you've got to do something, right? Because guess what? If you don't do anything, you're going to end up like that video we played at the beginning. You're going to be that person in that meat suit who just spends their whole life working for pages with faces on it that actually they just keep making more of. So, it is what it is. So at the end of the day, you really just want to try to get good habits. So control the way that you spend, try to do regular saving, disciplined investment. So that's what we're talking about here on the channel. These are the key significant things that you need, because the thing is, once you form the habit, it's locked in. It's like set in stone, it's like almost you can't do it any other way once it's a habit. So are your habits good or are they bad when it comes to finance? And so, the biggest thing of why I mentioned and I reference, 8th grade math, because just in simple, like finance is really not that complex. I know sometimes that it can seem very hard and challenging and a lot of terms, and it seems like sometimes it's never gonna click. But I promise, if you say, hey, this is just 8th grade math, this is just, ninth grade English. If you can learn a definition, if you've ever taken a test in your life, right? Or if you've ever passed one test in your life, you can learn finance. Because what did you have to do for that test? All you had to do was study for it. And then so studying is, hey, what does a ratio mean? Hey, what does debt mean? What does an interest rate mean? These are just basic terms that we all are doing. Like, people are going into debt. People are, experiencing interest, but they don't really know what it means. So that's, once again, more ignorance, because they're doing things that they don't know. So the key thing is we just at least want to know what we're doing. But, and the last thing is just like, time is the most powerful factor. The concept of compound interest, the time value of money, shows that your money can grow exponentially over time, given enough time, And you also need a reasonable rate of return. You don't want to be in something that is going to give you marginal returns. That's why we're going to look in depth of all of these ratios, see what is better than the next thing, and then make your choice from there, And so that's what it's all about. Okay, so number 3 is, what are you doing with your spare time? Getting financially educated is not only how you grow, but maintain the growth, So like I said, not just, reading a book one time when you're in college, being like, oh, I read a finance book when I was 19, or I read a finance book when I was, young, and you're 30, 40, 50 years old now, and you're not applying any of that stuff. It's a constant saying, hey, let me spend 30 minutes a day here. Let me spend an hour, this weekend here, specifically allocating time, intentional time to deepen those roots, right? And so, because it has to be deeply rooted. So there's an incredible book that I was listening on audiobook, and it is called The Cash Flow Quadrant. This is by Robert Kiyosaki, but there's a term, or I guess you can say there's a phrase that he mentioned in the book that actually made a lot of sense to me. And the term was, the difference between rich people and poor people is what they do in their spare time. And I got to thinking, in the times when I was very much wanting to have a little bit more financial freedom. I wanted to be able to say, hey, what do I need to do to be able to not have to worry about how I'm gonna pay for this stuff? So, and as many of you guys know, that's something that I dedicated my life to when it comes to football, is saying, hey, this is what I feel like I'm good at. So let me spend as many hours as I can, all my spare time, instead of just going to just hang out or just do nothing. Hey, let me go do some extra things on the field. Let me go watch some extra film. Let me do this extra stuff, because this is at the time the one thing I knew that could give me an opportunity to, have a healthy financial situation, And so that's just my personal anecdote, my personal example. But for you, ask yourself this question, like, hey, when you're done working, you're not spending time with your kids or your family, what are you doing in your spare time? So those of you that are watching, I know what you're doing in your spare time. You're doing the right thing. You're educating yourself to give you an opportunity, because that's what it's all about. So for example, this is kind of what I wrote, and I kind of want you guys to kind of go on this thought process with me. So financial education is akin to a journey of discovery, because even me, I'm learning new things every single day, every single week. And so, for example, initially you understand the basics. Like I talked about, what is interest rate? What is a ROI, a return on investment? So, or for example, like what I put was like understanding the importance of savings. That should be a basic of understanding why you should save. And if that ain't hit you upside the head yet, I mean, yeah, start there. Hey, can you save 10% of your gross income? That's like super basic. Now from there, as you delve deeper, you start to comprehend more complex topics, because I think that's the thing. Sometimes when you just try to look at everything at once, you're going to be like, yeah, it's too much for me. But if you just say, hey, let me just start with the basics, it makes it very much easier to understand the more complex things. So things such as, okay, investing, risk assessment, or the concept of diversification, So when your financial education becomes deeply rooted, that's what we're talking about,
it's, you know, as if you can internalize these concepts. They become second nature to you. And that's the key thing. Once it's second nature to you, now it's easy to do. And these are going to be guided by your decisions and helping you navigate the financial landscape with confidence. Because at the end of the day, this is all about confidence. 9 times out of 10, when things aren't going well financially, it's because one, either you did things ignorantly, two, you don't have the confidence to stick with the strategy. Really, it's those two, you know. And so, just like any journey, the landscape changes over time. So, understanding the different ebbs and flows. So, especially within the market, you got to understand: hey, is it an accumulation phase? Are we in the bull run? Are we in the bear phase? You know. So the landscape is always changing. There's going to be different opportunities that arise. So new technologies, especially within blockchains. Understand the economic conditions shift. So the business cycles, how we talk about the interest rates. Also, learning the different financial products. So understanding the difference between owning real Ethereum, so in your own wallet, versus a Ethereum ETF maybe in the future, or real Bitcoin versus a Bitcoin ETF. Two totally different things. One is a product. One is the actual intrinsic value within the asset. And so, and the key thing is you've got to stay updated, and that's why we have the Volsa Crypto Education Telegram chat, simply because you need to understand as you accumulate the knowledge, you got to stay updated to what's coming next and how to ingest it and know what to do for yourself. So, the best thing about it, in essence, a deep-rooted financial education is not just about accumulating the wealth, because it's really not, but also about preserving it and growing it. And it's about making informed decisions to stand the test of time. Key words: standing the test of time. It's an ongoing process, a lifelong journey that is sure to yield you positive results. Because at the end of the day, no matter what you do, all the choices you make are going to give you a result. The result may be good, or it may be bad, or it may be in between. But ideally, what I think a lot of us are shooting for is for good results in our life. So, all right, before we hit these charts with these ratios, we're going to talk about what a ratio is. So I want to talk about this concept. Now, when it comes to once we understand a ratio, we need to understand how do we capture the value in each ratio, okay? So like we talked about, everything has a ratio if it has a price, or if you have to give up your time for it, it has a ratio as well. So the definition for a ratio, so write this down. A ratio is a relation that compares two numbers or two quantities. All right. So Big Mac from McDonald's versus the dollar, right? So you exchange your dollar for a Big Mac. So I want to say, nowadays it's probably like $8 if you want the meal, give or take. And so you trade $8 for the Big Mac, the large Sprites, and the large fry with extra sauce. And they have to be made fresh, or else it's not as good, right? So that ratio used to be different back in the day. Instead of it being $8, it used to be like $3 in the 90s. You know what I'm saying? In the 60s, it used to be a whole like dollar and some change. So understand that the ratio is changing. Now, here's the thing. With this example that I'm giving you guys, the Big Mac has changed. It's probably the same. I mean, I've been eating them since I was, 6, 7, and they've tasted the same for the most part. Now, with that being said, but they've costed more. Now, why is that? Why did the ratio change? It's because, guess what? Those dollars that I've been using this whole time, they're not worth as much. So I need more of those dollars to pay for the same Big Mac. Y'all see the ratio? So, the ratio can change where it may be 8-1, for example. So for these $8, I'm getting one Big Mac. Back in the day, the ratio was different. It was maybe 2-1. So for the $2, I'm getting the one Big Mac. So that's the key in understanding the proportion. So, we can understand the statement or equation that equates the two ratios. So let's stop there. I kind of hit us with the whole monologue of mindset, the things that we need in our knowledge before we attack these ratios and look at these charts. Let's see what you guys think about that. I know it's a lot of good stuff. Y'all have any comments, thoughts? I'm curious. What y'all got? Let's see. Hey, let's go. Okay, so we got, I appreciate the alpha, bro. Keep it coming, for sure. And this is what it's all about. We have to get this info. That way we can apply it. And then from there, that's how we make it to the end goal, What up? Mexican lost in Asia. Hey, I appreciate you all the way on the other side of the world. And yeah, we rolling, we rocking. So now the ratios that we're gonna look at are not just crypto. I think a lot of times as a crypto investor, we just want to focus on for these dollars or these euros I got, or the British pound I got, or this yen I got, what coin should I buy with it? But we have to see, okay, well, should I buy this coin versus that coin? Because, for example, can I buy Ethereum or should I be buying Bitcoin? What does that ratio look like? We'll take a look. Should I buy, I don't know, coin 1000 dog inu, or should I buy whatever, Illuvium? Okay, we can look at the ratio between those two. And the biggest thing is, and so remember this, the longer the chart or the more time that I've been able to extract data from the ratio, the more informed decision I can make. So it's harder to look at a ratio for something that's only been out for a couple months. But it's easier to look at a ratio between two things that have existed at least for a few years. And it's way easier to look at a ratio for things that have existed for decades. So we're going to start with the things that we know that have existed for decades. So currencies and debt. We're going to look at, the hourly wage. We know that this is something that they've been paying people on the hourly for decades. We know that they've been building homes for decades. So we're going to look at these big ratios because those are the easiest ones to decide on first. And then we can go into the micro ratios. So maybe like these small market cap coins. But then from there, in between, then we'll look at, okay, should I invest in commodities versus stock? And then what stocks? Should I stick with the SP 500 or go with a specific sector like technology? Those are things that have existed for decades. So we'll be able to kind of delineate the difference between those. So, yeah, we got a lot of stuff to go through. I want to say I got 10 ratios, but then also looking at derivatives. And I'm going to put this comment back up here. So the macro to micro picture. Yes, if you're just looking at micro, guess what? You're already failing. I'm sorry to tell you, but you're already failing to look at the big landscape. And it's like this, because I got my football hat on. I'm going to put this in football terms. So if you are, let's say, playing center, so the center is like probably one of the most important positions on the field. You're in charge of hiking the ball. But if you only just focus on just hiking the ball, you don't focus on blocking, you don't focus on what play needs to be ran, you don't focus on telling your guard that he needs to block the tackle on the other side. You don't tell, your quarterback where the Mike linebacker is at. I'm speaking football talk. So for y'all that know football at a high knowledge, this is what a center has to do every single play. Guess what? You're not going to be a center for very long, So that's when I see people just looking, oh, hey, let me just buy this dog coin. They're looking at just a small thing because they don't even know if buying that dog coin is a good, because here's the thing. There's another thing that we need to talk about. It's called opportunity cost. Because if you put your money into something that has a either high failure rate or maybe at a high price valuation compared to the people that bought it 3 months ago, right? On that RSI, for example, when the RSI is at like 100, you got to understand maybe this is not what I should be getting at this current time. Maybe there's something that's at a lower RSI, but has the same type of, potential here in the future. So these are the conversations that you need to be able to have with yourself or with somebody else. And so this is what we're talking about, looking at the big picture, going into the micro. So now that we have it, let's see, have to catch up on a replay. Look forward to this breakdown for sure. We'll come back through. Definitely leave your comment, when you watch this at the end of the day. So now question for you guys. What do you think is one of the most important things to understand when it comes to, I guess you can say, money? In the chat, I'm curious. And I ask you guys again, what do you think is one of the most important things to understand when it comes to money? And I'll wait. I need at least 2 or 3 people to give me, because I know what I think and I know what is true about it. I'm curious to know what you guys think. Let's see here. Oh, yeah. People don't understand that. What, opportunity cost? Yes. No, they don't understand opportunity costs. It is a hidden gem of information, like opportunity cost. Should I eat this donuts, or should I go ahead, instead of eating this donut, go drink some water and maybe hit a couple laps around the block? Opportunity cost. One, I'm going to increase my calorie intake of, trans fat, sugars that probably going to give me high cholesterol, all this stuff that's probably not so good for me. Or I wasted that opportunity of eating that donut, and I could have did something that could increase my blood flow, actually give me more energy by just doing a nice jog around the block. It helps my mind settle, and I can actually think a little bit more clearly. And so there's opportunity cost. That's one example that doesn't even involve money. Okay. So exchange of value, your purchasing power will always decrease over time. Very important. I very much am in agreement with this, because if you're always just exchanging your money for things that do not ever yield you a return, or it may give you an experience, but it doesn't give you longevity, right? It doesn't give you stability through time, because that's something that I think that what I would say, my statement is that I think that when it comes to money, most people don't understand literally the most, and I've said it like a gazillion times, when it comes to money, one of the most important factors is time. So the time that you spend to get it, the time that you spend allocating it, the time that you spend, whatever it may be, like the time that you spend giving it away, the time that you spend paying bills with it, the time that, you have to essentially, like, I will say this, like time, nothing gets past time. Nothing, nobody, like even us, like we come into this world, sack of bones. When we leave this world, sack of bones through time. Like we start off and we return to what we started as. So time is the biggest factor. And the key thing is, the more time that you apply into several aspects of money, the more time that you work for it, I guess, is potentially a good thing. The more time you're learning about it, potentially is a good thing. The more times you do the right things with it is a good thing. Vice versa, the more time that you work for it can be a bad thing too, right? Because if you do that your whole life, the less amount of time that you spend thinking about it or even learning about it, the more ill-informed decisions that you're going to make for yourself and your family. The less time that you have it invested, the more time or the opportunity cost you have of not getting compound interest, basically, is what's going on. So people don't understand the ratio between money and time. Compound interest has to do with time. Ratio, being able to get something at a good value, has to deal with time. Maybe waiting, instead of me trying to get everything when it's expensive, like at the top of a bull run, ding, 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 probably majority of people, right? Learning to say, okay, let me look at this ratio. Time will tell me, actually, this ratio will be more in my favor. Bitcoin goes from 69K to 15K, better ratio. I've waited this year. Okay, cool. I've let the time go past. Now let me DCA. So understanding time, understanding the cyclical nature of the asset. So there's a lot of things, but during the time, what's been happening to every single person on this stream watching is that the dollars or the currency that you're saving or using is decreasing in value. And I can show you every single currency, and it'll tell us this fact. It's not my opinion. This is a fact. And so, you got to understand what that does to your purchasing power. Like I gave that example, the Big Mac with the dollar. Through time, it's going to just keep going up. Big Mac stays the same. Let's see here. Let's talk about it. So your relationship with money. This is key. Like I remember growing up at the kitchen table, we never talked about the concept. It's just kind of like, nah, I'm not going to talk about that. Reason why simply is because there's probably lack thereof. Like if you feel not confident or there's a lacking in the area, you're typically not going to talk about it. And so I typically want to say, like, even if you feel like you're in lack, with the positive mindset, the work ethic of saying, hey, I know I can do better, so then I will do better. You won't mind talking about where you're at, because if I talk about where I'm at, I know I can then talk about the things I need to do to get to where I'd like to go. So that's the first thing, is being able to look at where you're at. But that's the thing. Like, your relationship is going to be due to what you learn from your parents or those around you, but then what you've already done in your life. And then so it's about trying to change that relationship to a positive one. And 9 times out of 10, you feel positive when you're confident and when things have gone well. Like, you don't feel positive when things are just like racking up on your mind, your body, your emotions, and you're just like, man, I'm working. I feel like I'm doing everything I can, but it's still not working out. The reason why is because, you still got to figure out some of these equations, right? And so we can all do it. Knowing how to invest money into good assets. And so that's the thing, understanding ratios. So if I just save, how is that compared to investing in the S&P 500? If I invest in the S&P 500, how is that compared to investing in the tech sector? If I invest in the tech sector, how is that compared to investing in the Bitcoin? If I invest only in the Bitcoin, how is that compared to investing with a mix of altcoins? So all these ratios. Excuse me, let me get a swig. Hold on, let me do the ASMR. I got the Coke zero sugar today. So yeah, really trying to dig deep with your relationship, trying to get a positive relationship and understand the good assets. So being able to ratio one versus the other, key. Yes, great book. Psychology of Money is an amazing book because it really, really, really teaches you. It's all mindset stuff, And 9 times out of 10, you can't make good progress without being in the right mind state. So, amazing book recommendation. I really would recommend that. Yep, 2 recommendations on that. Cool. All right, so I'm glad that you guys are thinking about this. You're thinking about like the most important thing when it comes to the concept of money. Knowing that, okay, money only comes from being able to provide value. So the amount of money, I had somebody tell me this, the amount of money that you get paid is in congruency to the problems that you solve in the world or the value that you provide in the world. And so if you're providing a good enough value to those around you, guess what? Money should have no choice but to be attracted towards you. So the question you must have is, what am I doing to increase my skill set? And how do you increase your skill set is by knowing more and then executing on what you know. Like, for example, for me, how did I make it to the NFL? Was simply by me learning how to do different things. So learning how to run faster, learning how to, lift weights to make myself stronger, learning how to memorize plays, and then doing it over and over and over again. That way I could execute every time I play a game. So I did all of that in practice. So when the games come around, all this stuff was a little bit easier for me. And then I played enough games that gave me the exposure from a college. And I played enough college games that gave me enough exposure from National Football League teams, right? So so all of that was a compounding. So like all of that was hold on, let me get the camera right. So all of that was the compounding nature that took year after year after year of doing the same thing over and over again. So investing is the same way, But okay, cool. So I think we're all caught up with the comments. Let's get into the charts and we'll go from there. So let's do this. Share screen. So many good ones. Where should I start? Let's start here. So we're starting with the macro first, and then we're going to the micro. So this is something that I briefly talked about previously, and we have to understand first and foremost, right, the devaluation of the fiat currency that you're using. So we know that. So that one's a given. But then now we have to look at the ratios between like what the average person gets in their wage versus the things that they want. So versus a car or versus like that new home, like we talked about Jim and Jane, they want to go and buy their home. So how does that ratio look for them through the time? So what we find is, what we have here, we have the median. So, okay, I'm going to give you guys the actual charts, right? So, or let you guys know what these charts are comprised of. So the first chart, what we have is going to be, let me see if it'll show us the signal. Yeah, here we go. So the first thing that we're looking at is going to be the median sales price of the new home sold in the United States. So what is the average new home cost? So all those that are looking to achieve the American dream, we're going to take that and ratio it against the average hourly wage for someone that works in the United States. So, and that chart is USWAG. So what do we find is that the cost of new homes continue to outpace how much people are getting paid through the years. Like new homes are going up faster and higher than the hourly wage for the average person. The reason why I know this is because it continues to make higher lows. Like, so continues to make higher lows through time, meaning that like the wages never outpace the cost of a new home. Never. Because new highs and new lows every decade. Y'all see that? New highs, new lows. Like what we would ideally, like if we lived in a perfectly fair system, like what this chart would look something like this. So we wouldn't see this elevating and going to the upside. We would see a chart that looks more like, here, let me get all this stuff off the screen. So we would see a chart that looked more like this, flat. So literally that the new home cost is staying right in lockstep with the wages. So if that makes sense, we can take that. So this is what's going on, right? Here's a moving average of it. Here's what's going on. Just, hey, these new homes, they're just going to keep costing more and more and more. So basically, because here's the thing, the people earlier on in the 60s and the 70s, they had it a little bit easier, right? Simply because this acceleration of the dollar just depreciating was at the beginning. And then so that's the thing, like the game is getting harder and harder and harder and harder, right? So that's the key concept. And if it was fair, right, if we did not have any currency just devaluate through time, this ratio would be flat, meaning, hey, as the new homes come up in price, hey, we're going to pay people a little bit more to be able to afford these new homes. But that's not the case. So looking at the big case, the macro. Next chart. So this next chart, it's a beautiful one. And so this is a ratio that you can look up. It's easy to kind of conceptualize this because we all know that the United States is in tremendous amount of debt to the tune of about 34 trillion. But this ratio is the United States government debt to GDP. So we've heard about this, but what does it really mean? So let's talk about it. So GDP stands for gross domestic production or products. So how much is that, is that country producing? And so the key thing is ideally you don't want your debt to outpace how much you're producing. That's a real problem, So to kind of look at this, and we really want to try to pinpoint some of these times in particular, which we had a period of time and the thing is with the ratio, the quantity or the ticker in this example that you put first is going to be the first portion, and the ticker that you put secondly is going to be what you divide it by. So when we do it this way, this lets us know, okay, during time, like if it's going down, for example, this means that the second thing in the ratio is doing better than the first thing. So let me see if I can make this make sense. So let's just draw a line here. Let's just make it like green. And just to make the ratio make sense. So the first thing in the ratio, so we have, let's just put X and we have Y. Okay. So if X is doing better than Y, then we will see the chart go up. So like we talked about, or outpacing, not better, but I'll say outpacing. We'll see the chart go up. If Y is doing better than X, then we'll see during that time of that ratio, we'll see the chart go down. So understanding what the quantities are. So once again, we are looking at a couple things. We're looking at the GDP versus the debt. So the debt is X in this scenario, and the GDP is Y. So GDP. Okay. So knowing these things, there was a time period, and so this tracks all the way back to the 40s, y'all. So in the 40s, there's an immense amount of debt, but right here in 1946, do we know what's going on during this time? This is a time where we're not adding a whole bunch of debt. We're basically doing things. We're doing war games. Y'all remember World War One? Y'all remember World War Two? I want to say this is what, World War Two, 1945? And then so this is when the United States is making a whole lot of deals using OPM, other people's money, and essentially saying, hey, you want us to help you in this war? Hey, you do this for us. So things like the Bretton Woods Agreement comes in. So this is a time where we're producing more than we're going into debt. So this is a good time to be in. But then we hit a huge issue in 1981. And so going to do your research on these timelines are very important, because during this time in the late 70s, this is when we start to experience first of all, coming off of the gold standard in 1971. And then we have a decade of inflation. So this is the first time that we dealt with spiking inflation year upon year, all of the 70s. Go look it up on any chart. Go look at the SPX. And so what did they do to handle this inflation? Because they started the money printer, but then they accelerated it to what? Okay, cool. You know what? We got to give stimulus. How do they give stimulus? By creating more money. How do they create more money? By issuing new debt. And then so if you look at the 1980s, this is when we start to see that trend of interest rate starts to come down incrementally through the decades. And it's kind of like on a sloping going down. So, and as you can see, we've just had nothing but more debt than what the United States is producing. So this is the environment that we're currently in. So therefore, you must understand the hours that you're working, trying to produce whatever it is for your job, it's not going to outpace the devaluation of the dollar. And so this chart is showing us that. So I'm hoping that's clear and makes sense to you guys. Next chart. All right. So this next chart here, we have two ratios. So one ratio, we have bonds now. So, or we're going to look at, I would say this is going to be, because this is technically the bond yield for the 2-year and the 10-year, but this is what a lot of people look at in terms of inversion. And what I'll do, let's put this off for now. So this is the 2-year divided by the 10-year. So to make it plain, ideally, you want to, let's say you're an investor and you're saying, hey, I want to lock up my money with the government for 10 years. They should be giving you a good rate of interest for 10 years. And typically, they're going to be giving you more for that longer duration versus if you only did it for 2 years, typically, right? And then so when I mean typically, that is going to represent all the time below this white line is where you're getting paid more for, investing your money for longer periods of time with the government, 10 years versus 2 years. Okay. Now, every now and again, you'll get an inversion. Now, this inversion is basically saying that the government is willing to pay out more. So let's say instead of, you receiving 4% for, let's say you're receiving 4% for investing into a government bond for 10 years, right? Now, during this time of inversion, they're paying, let's say 5.5% for 2 years. So with less time, you're being able to get a higher rate of return. So this is an inversion. So this typically is a signal of economic weakness of when we have this inversion. So this inversion is signified by these boxes here. And this is, typically these are brief periods of time. This is a monthly chart. You don't see inversions for decades. You may see it for 8 months, year and a half. We've seen this inversion for quite some time here. And so typically this shows economic weakness. And how can we know that? Here, I'm going to pop up all the recessions. And so what you find is after you have an inversion, you have a time of economic weakness. But during this economic weakness, what happens, going back to that last chart, they just do more debt. So they drop the interest rates, more debt. And so, recessions can last all of, a year, 6 months. COVID was, 3 months. But we need to be able to look at the overall health of the spread, because this is what we're looking at, the spread between the bond rates. And ideally, you want it to be a nice curve. And so incrementally, the longer duration that you go out, the higher the yield is. That is a nice, healthy curve. And generally, those time periods of where you're kind of inverting and coming back and forth between those rates, those are the volatile times. But here's the key is that can pose as an opportunity, or it can pose as, fear for some people. So what's fear for someone can be a huge, almost like once a lifetime chance for someone else. And then, so for example, during these inversion times, and especially, coming out of an inversion, if you are the people that are investing, if prices come down, or, we're in a time where they're not doing so much stimulus, that's actually good for you because you can front run the people that maybe are not investing during this time, because guess what? They're coming when the stimulus comes. Like when they create more debt, more loans come out, that means they can borrow more money. That means they can buy more assets. That's just how it works. And then, so this is a beautiful thing of knowing where we're at on this inversion. Okay, cool. Next chart. So now let's talk a little bit more about stocks. So why talk stocks when we're investing in crypto? Simply just because we're looking at something that has a bigger market cap than crypto, and we're looking at particular sectors. So one thing that, and I'll tell you this, so within stocks, people like to do capital rotations. So during certain periods of time when they see that there's an inversion or economic downturn that might be abreast, they're going to go into things that are going to be a little bit more defensive. So things like consumer staples, for example. So we're talking about Coca-Cola. We're talking about companies that have existed for a very long time, GM, Adobe, stuff like that. And so these tend to be the less volatile to downside risk. And so those are time periods that you want to know on. Like, so you want to know these times because, like I was telling you about the surfer, right? He needs to know, okay, the storm's coming. I need to kind of go out and get off this wave. Let me take my profits and go in the house and chill out until the sun comes back out. And then, so this is like a barometer of risk. So what we're looking at currently is risk on versus risk off. So risk on is the XLK side. So that's, people investing in the tech sector versus XLP. So the ratio here is consumer staples, XLP, which is the defensive side, versus XLK, which is investing in the tech sector. So this is like investing in stuff like, we're talking about NVIDIA, Adobe is in there. There's other things in that sector, which I'll pull it up here in a second. Let me actually do this back in the background. So XLK. So just okay, what on the forefront of technology when it comes to investing? You're going to be looking at, let's see here. And this is, in a composite of a whole bunch of different companies. So you're looking at Apple, Microsoft, these are huge companies, two large companies. Like I mentioned, Adobe, Cisco, Salesforce, stuff like that. So, this is the tech sector. So let me give you an example. So this is when people are feeling a little bit more risky. So portfolio managers are saying, hey, this is where society is going. We're using more tech every single day. We might as well go ahead and invest in this sector. And so, this is something that people can invest in. So how often, or what are the capital rotations where people are choosing to be more defensive versus being more risk on going into tech? So we can understand that with this ratio here. So going back to this chart. So XLP being the first one in the ratio. So during this time, the 2000s, right? So early 2000s, people are going more defensive. Why? Because that's during the tech bubble. And so, but then from here, we've seen a big decade from 2003 to about 2016, where tech is just starting to figure itself out. So consumer staples is pretty much in lockstep. So it didn't matter which one you invested in during that time. They both perform fairly similar, right? But then what have we seen since 2016? We've seen tech. So remember, right, the thing on the right side of the ratio, if the chart's going down, that means that one's outpacing the first side. Tech has tremendously, outpaced defensive stocks or consumer staples. And then, so what did we just see right here? We had a time period. So we can do a little basic TA, right? So now that we know the ratio, let's do some TA on it. And so we had a time period where, we're in a cyclical regime of where tech is just continuing to outpace it. year after year after year after year. We had a time period of where people went back on the defense and said, hey, and so that was all of 2023. So if you remember crypto and all this stuff, well, not all 2023, I'm sorry, all of 2022. Crypto is getting smacked. The tech sector is getting smacked. S&P 500 is getting smacked. Everything. Commodities are getting smacked. But people will say, hey, if I have to choose anything, I have to be allocated to anything, maybe just at least go to the things that are less volatile. So they'll go more so into consumer staples. But as you can see, that time is over. That rotation has flipped back into risk on. And it's continuing to stay risk on. Because what do we see? We see a new low, basically meaning, past this area here. So, since, mid 2023, this thing's rocking and running. And then how do we see momentum? Just turn it into a Heikin-Ashi candle. And we can still see the long overall trend. And the beautiful thing about what we're doing here, we're not looking at a daily, we're not looking at a weekly, we're looking at a 3-month chart. So a quarterly chart showing us that each quarter tech is continuing to outpace. So these aren't small candles looking like it's going to turn over and go to the other direction. This is continuing to outpace. So, I can at least extract for the next 3 months, tech is going to be a better bet versus, going into something in the consumer staple category within stocks. So boom, easy to look at the ratio. Let's continue on. So now we've talked about bond rates and we've talked about stocks a little bit. And they were both in their separate cohorts. Now let's bring them together. So what does it look like if I'm a person that wants to invest in a bond? And hold on, let me see if I can get this chart up. 1 second. So let's bring that back up. Let's talk bribe ratios. I like it. Let's bring this up real quick and we'll get back to the comments. All right. So y'all should be able to see this here. So what does it look like for someone that has capital? And now try to put yourself in someone that is managing $2 million, $3 million, $5 million. Because guess what? At some point, if you keep investing in crypto long enough, this is going to be you. So let's have these conversations now. So now when it comes to allocating capital, $5 million, $3 million, do I always want to keep it in something that's going to give me large returns? You might be more so in the wealth preservation mindset at that point. So maybe looking at 1 month, 3-month bonds, maybe, your alleyway, And so what we have is, so BIL, this ticker is going to represent all the short duration bonds. So BIL is going to be the ETF, the Bloomberg ETF that represents 1 to 3 month bond yields. Okay. So we're going to do that ratio versus the tech sector. And same thing, ever since 2009, so the financial crisis and this is even looking at year by year basis, you're still safer annually investing in tech than just going with short duration bonds. Because why? This chart only goes one direction. Like it doesn't oscillate up and down. Like if there was like, okay, there's a season to be in bonds and a season to be in tech, you'd see this kind of oscillate back and forth. All right. But that's not the case. It's all one direction, So the probability, and that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the ratios to understand probability through time. Is you're better off through the years just continuing to hold on to your tech sector stocks. And of course, you potentially want to diversify. You don't only want to have tech, but we're just looking at, hey, what's better than the other? And I would say, okay, maybe I could know the best from the worst and stick with the top 3 of the best ones instead of mixing 5 of the worst ones and 1 good one. And that's what people are doing. This is what TradFi is doing. They've got a whole bunch of crap. They've got bond yields. They've got Coca-Cola. But I get my 6% dividend. Yeah, but guess what? The outpacement, the dollar devaluation, is more than 6%. So who cares? You need to outpace that. So, TradFi is just now coming over to having a whole bunch of crap and just now touching Bitcoin. And we know Bitcoin is just the tip of the iceberg. So we have got these people beat, man. But we've got to stick to it. Just like how this ratio is for a decade, you got to stick with this crypto game for a decade to really get the butter from the duck. And so XLK, now there's a period of time briefly, but it's a blip on the radar of where holding bonds, short-term duration bonds, was better than holding on to the tech sector. But as you can already see, that's already been eaten back up. So this 1 year of that being the case, it was null and void because we've already eaten it back up in 2023. Now we're heading into 2024 of a trend that has a cyclical nature of just going one direction. So the question is, do I go back into bonds? The answer probably is no, because we have the data to show us that's not the probable outcome based upon the ratio between these two in particular. So cool. Next. This one's pretty good. So this one is important because we're taking the DXY. So this is the dollar, and the DXY is actually a ratio between the dollar and all the other fiat currencies. But I'll give you guys a spoiler alert. The dollar is the cleanest, dirtiest shirt. So it is being debased, but not as fast as the rest of the currencies. So we'll look at the best fiat currency versus, typically going to be the best sector of, stocks that you can allocate to, which is going to be NDX. That's going to be the NASDAQ. So once again, specifically, looking at new age, these are companies that have not been around for 50, 60 years, but typically these are going to be the new age tech companies within the last 20, 30 years. And so same thing, right? Yes, there's blips on the radar, but what is the overall trend? And what it's telling us is you are better off investing versus sitting in dollars. So for the person that sat in dollars, so let's say in 1985, $1. So, and this is how you can make this make sense and make it easier. So let's say this person holding $1. So there's two people. The person holding $1 and the opportunity cost of if they would have invested into the NASDAQ. So this is how you measure the opportunity cost. I'm going to do it for y'all real quick. So what happened was the opportunity cost was their dollar compared to their potential investment if they would have just invested into something in the NASDAQ. The opportunity cost went down 99.55%. And this is looking at over a span of 40 years. And that's a working timeline for most people. Like most people work anywhere between 40, 60, 70 years even sometimes. So with that being said, the opportunity cost was tremendous. 99%, 99 times of a bad decision or a worse decision, if that makes sense. Now, here's the kicker. Let's see what happens to the person that invested that dollar in 1985 and what is the growth of that dollar compared to just sitting in it. And so all we got to do is flip the ratio. So super easy. So we'll go NDX. Let's bring the NASDAQ up. Boom. Versus DXY. And we'll go from the same data point, the same entry point. And so what we find out is this chart here. This person, that dollar, that value storage in the NASDAQ yielded this person in this scenario over 40 years almost about a 220x. So 219x, which is 21,982%. Can y'all see that? Let's zoom all the way in so we can see that percentage. That's going from 1985 to now. So one choice, one decision. So this actually really is a 220 times better decision by saying, hey, I'm going to invest my $1 here versus just holding that dollar back in the day. One choice, one decision. So y'all can see the opportunity cost. All right. So now we kind of say, okay, well, what's pretty good in the stock market? The NASDAQ looking pretty decent. What else is there? Well, can we look at commodities even? Or let's look at stuff that's not even the United States. So let's take a look there. All right. So now we have something that's a little bit more of an oscillator. So what I present here, this is going to represent all of the other markets. So all of the investable markets. So this is the European market. This is, the China market. Everything outside of the United States. And it's all in one ETF. So what we see is now this is a little bit more of an oscillator. This is basically saying that these other countries have time periods where they're, performing a little bit better, or in terms of their market, is outpacing the US market in GDP even. And so this is an oscillator. So this one is very interesting to look at because we need to understand, okay, excluding the United States, what are the other countries doing? And what I could say is because the United States, they're going to hold themselves up. When we see the other countries doing good or just a little tad better in the United States with certain metrics, that's actually good for the United States too. Why? Key reason is because all the transactions, specifically, most of them are still being done in dollars. So anybody holding the dollar benefits from the other countries doing well versus the United States. Key thing to understand. So this oscillator, basically what this tells me is you want to be a holder of the dollar when we see these green candles being printed. That's what this means. And so this is very cyclical. And the times where you want to consider maybe not being, right, for example, in dollars or anything that is denominated in dollars, or go back to something more of like low risk, is going to be time periods where we get high on this pairing. So if you go back and track a lot of this stuff, these are time periods where the S&P 500 is reaching local tops. How do we know that? We can pull up the data. So let's pull up the S&P 500, SPX, and let's look at some of the data and see what we can extract. So this is why knowing ratios is super important. It's extremely helpful. All right. And can we get this on a log? Yeah. So something that's very interesting about this is a leading indicator, okay? So leading indicator meaning, and let me see if I could turn this into a line, or let's see if we can go. Yeah, we'll keep it a line. We don't need to change this into candles. So this is a leading indicator for y'all, okay? So this is and let's see, let me get this a little bit more congruent so we can see. All right. So one thing that y'all will notice, and what I'll do is I'll delineate, it's going to give you a 3 to 6 month lead on local tops. Because when you start to see this hit the top of this parallel channel, you see the stock market is still pretty high, but then it comes down and retraces. And we can see this 3 to 6 month lead because each candle is 3 months. We can see this lead, right? Sometimes 3 months, maybe even, 9 months in advance. So anywhere between 1 to 3 quarters in advance. So this is something to know. But guess what? If you didn't know this ratio existed, then, you didn't have anything to help you make your good decisions, right? So same thing here. You see how this is topping out. And then just a few quarters later, then we have a retracement in the SP 500. Same thing here. This tops out. And in April of 2021, in October of 2021, then you see this downturn. And same thing on the downside. When this is bottoming out at the bottom of this parallel channel, these are premier times to invest. So we'll change these to another color. So using this ratio literally can tell you risk on, risk off as well. But using economics, this has nothing to do with crypto, because I can throw on Bitcoin's chart as well, and it'll tell us these undervaluations and overvaluations. So very, very, interesting thing to understand. Like every time that we see one of these yellow lines, these were incredible times to be investing, right? So key factor to understand. So, and these times are going to, you may not get the exact bottom, but this is going to be the refresh of things kind of coming back into the flow of things around the world. So key thing to know, and definitely, remember this chart. So this is going to be ACWX on TradingView. I don't know, y'all. There's nobody giving out this value. I have not found anybody giving out this value. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. You guys want more of this? There's plenty more on the Vaults of Crypto. Join. It's super easy. vaultsofcrypto.com. We'll touch that here in a bit. But yeah, let's keep on rocking. So now let's take a look at some commodities. So the biggest commodity that typically people are going to talk about, people know about, is going to be gold. And so with the general basis of saying, hey, do I choose stocks or a commodity, gold being like the leading one that most people go towards, let's see what that looks like. And once again, through the decades, we find this being on an oscillator. So like there's time periods where gold is doing better than the stock market, and there's time periods where the stock market is doing better than gold. So gold being the first one in the ratio, meaning if this chart is going up, gold is doing better than SP 500. This is going down, then SP 500 is doing better than gold. So what this is telling me is same thing. This is an oscillator. So this is seasonal. So key thing to kind of address and talk about the seasonality of this stuff here. So one thing that we can kind of see, and nothing is ever perfect, but you can see these time periods of undervaluation and overvaluation. So now, with that being said, both of these are not priced in, like both of these are different. Like this is gold is also priced in dollars, and also the S&P is priced in dollars. But when you do the ratio versus each other, you take the dollar out of it. And now it's just choice. Which one should I do during this time period? And, the plight, from looking at this, for example, would to be, okay, when this chart is at the lower ends, maybe doing a little bit of allocating towards gold is a better value through time versus the S&P 500. And so this is not the tech sector. This is not the NASDAQ. This is simply just S&P 500, the top 500 stocks in the United States. And 7 of those stocks, the Magnificent Seven, are literally leading the whole. Like the other 493 are very lackluster versus the top 7, So gold versus really those other 493. And, this chart may say there is a plight to saying gold or something like gold. So because I see gold as what? Store of value. What are the other things that have store of value? The narrative of Bitcoin and Ethereum and all that good stuff. Store of value. Why? Because limited supply, or like Ethereum, decreasing supply. Key thing, right? S&P 500, it doesn't have that proposition, right? Because they can continue to make more shares for whatever company for people to buy. They can continue to dilute the shares. So things like stock splits and all that kind of stuff. So we need to look at something that has, and now gold, they're going to continue to mine more, but the inflation rate for gold is less than what it would be for the S&P 500. So now we're talking about something that has a low inflation rate relative to something that has a high inflation rate. And then we'll go to something that has, equal inflation rates, and then something that has low inflation rate to decreasing inflation rate or deflation rate. So something that is in deflation versus inflation. So hoping that y'all are tracking. So what we find is maybe, if you're looking only between these two options, you might stack up a little bit more gold than your S&P 500 ETF. And, and then through the years, you may see, but the thing is, this is a long-term chart, right? Like this is not looking like, year upon year. This is looking at we're looking all the way back until 1998. So this is a long-term play. So if you're looking at this chart, you're not thinking about this next 2 years, right? You're not thinking about this next, 5 years. You're really thinking about next 10 years, next 20 years. What is something that I could hedge my bet? And so ideally, you may want to think about allocating towards gold more now than ever compared to time periods of 1982 or even 2012. This is what this ratio is telling us. All right. So now, like I mentioned before, now we can look at things that are kind of like kind. So things that have the same narrative. Gold versus Bitcoin. And just like how holding the dollar versus the NASDAQ was a horrible decision, holding gold versus Bitcoin is a horrible decision. Why? Because this is a down-only chart, meaning that Bitcoin always on a long duration, and I could say always because, or well, not always, majority of the time, which is if we want to really extract the data, like 98% of the time, which dang near is always, is going to be gaining more value than gold. And this is what this is telling us, right? And if I did this versus dollar, right, that's just the Bitcoin chart. And as you know, versus the dollar, it just keeps making new highs. So talking to someone that holds only gold and like Peter Schiff, you got to have gold. Why would you have Bitcoin? Blah, blah, blah. You got to understand what they're saying is just to distract you. They know they're wrong. Trust me. Peter knows this ratio. He's a very smart guy. But guess what? He has a company. He has what he's known for. He has a way that he makes money. And how he makes money is telling people, especially older people, to buy gold. So why would he tell anybody anything different? Especially, something that is much better. Like, nah, that's not his game. So don't listen to what people are talking about. Just look at the chart. So gold better than Bitcoin. And the thing is, this is the proper. Now we're getting into crypto a little bit, So let's see if we could look at these time periods where gold, basically just doesn't go down as much as Bitcoin. That's all this is saying. Because it can either say it's doing better than or just not going down as much as. And basically, when you see this going up, this is just representing the short-term periods of the bear market for Bitcoin. So these are just the small blips on the radar. So y'all see when we look at things on a larger scale that these bear markets really ain't nothing. Like the bear market or Bitcoin going from 48K to 42K really is nothing, because at the end of the day, the ratio is still in your favor. And this chart looks even better versus the dollar. And so this is like time periods of saying, okay, it's just not outpacing gold as much, or gold is just holding steady a little bit longer. But over a decade, from 2010 to now, 14 years, it's just been, up only. So 99.9%, worse decision holding gold versus Bitcoin, and like a couple million, times a better decision holding Bitcoin versus gold. So, and that's if we invert the chart. So invert the chart, pretty simple, right? We just see Bitcoin just continuing, but as we see, diminishing returns for Bitcoin. So we see that it's not, it's gonna become less exponential versus gold is what this is showing us. Okay. And so this chart looks a little bit different versus the dollar, but versus gold, which is something that is in competition with Bitcoin as far as, money being given to the asset class. It is, essentially these gaps in between the highs are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So maybe we can look for something else that has the same proposition of value storage, right? Limited supply, not as in receiving network growth, because that's another factor. So let's look at Ethereum versus gold. And what we find is, where Ethereum is at is more so like right here. So going into this lunge, and Bitcoin is going into like, this smaller little lunge where, it's versus gold, it'll probably top out with a smaller space, So a smaller space every single cycle. So something like that versus gold. We want something that's going to give us a larger space. So a larger, clip in terms of, what it's outpacing versus gold. So let's come to Ethereum. So Ethereum, same thing, not as old as Bitcoin, but doing the same thing versus gold, is outpacing. So simple to see. Let's invert the chart. So, that's log. Let's invert. And so as you can see, Ethereum is outpacing holding gold, but now y'all can see, right? Now these lunges, we're still going into its third lunge, right? So, this next lunge is going to be a nice one, similar to what Bitcoin was doing on its first couple of lunges in its bull run versus gold. So we can expect to see, a nice lunge to the upside. So this is going to be something to experience. So holding Ethereum versus gold since the pandemic, for example, here, 97%. Oh, so 90, it's more than a 20 times better choice. 97% is like 25% or 20 times better decision. Here, let's get the exact number. So all we got to do is go ETH, gold. Let's see if that comes up. Nope, that ain't it. ETH, Ethereum. So let's do that versus gold. Oh, no wonder the chart's still inverted. Okay, here we go. So let's do that. ETH and gold. Boom. All right. And then so yeah, it should be about like a 25 times better decision having Ethereum versus gold. Close. 40 times, or well, let's just measure just the candle bodies. Yeah, so about 31 times better decision having ETH versus gold, give or take. So that's a great proposition. And, this thing continuing to just gain value versus gold, coming across its 31-month moving average and, ready to experience a bull run in the near future. All right. Let's continue on. So now we've talked about stocks. We've talked about a little bit of crypto. I kind of want to go back into that whole commodity versus, I guess you can say, stocks. So are people looking to go into value storage, or are they looking to go into stocks? The narrative, value storage versus, hey, economic growth. We like these companies. That's kind of what we got to think about. And so DBC, this is going to represent every single commodity versus VOO. And so VOO is Vanguard's ETF for the S&P 500. And so, people think about going more into, value storage. Guess what? When they're fearful, right? And these are typically going to coincide with downwards movements in the stock market. And so what we're seeing is people really, really like to go to more commodities, or I guess you can say commodities just aren't pacing with, the S&P 500 for a majority of the time. But there are certain durations where we find that commodities are going to shine versus the stock market. And so here's the key thing. You see this trend change. It's in April 2021. That's COVID. So that's when people were the most fearful. So what do we see? We've seen crypto dip. We've seen stocks dip. And what they start to do, slowly buy up all the commodities through that time. Now they're starting to see, okay, things are getting a little bit better, right? But then they went back into commodities just for a quarter of, that last part of 2023. Now, the interesting thing is I want to kind of bring this full circle to crypto. Here, this lunge, so once they're like, okay, recession may come, but it won't seem as bad. So for a second time, this lunge down, okay, we'll start to go a little bit more risk on. Recognize when this is. This is October of 2023. Now ask yourself, when did the altcoins start to really take off? October of 2023. And what have they been doing for the last couple months? They've been growing. And then so that's the capital rotation from people being less fearful, trying to hold on to their money in commodities and defensive stocks, and going into more risk on. So we could look at like DBC versus Bitcoin, or one even better, DBC versus Total 3, which we'll get into that one in a bit. But yeah, this is how you assess one thing versus another. Quantity 1 versus quantity 2 ratios can help you make your good decisions. So in the future, what is this going to most likely do? Continue its long-term trend from 2010, 2011, of where we'll see the stock market just outperform commodities. So paint a picture here. All right, now this ratio I brought up a long time ago, and probably at least 10 times. I mentioned it a lot in the earlier streams back in 2022, and because that's when it was most important. This is going to be able to help us understand extreme fear and extreme bearishness and extreme greed and bullishness in the market. And so what this is taking, this is the put to call ratio. This is the PCC. And so, how we got to where we're at, if you want that information, hop on in the Volta Crypto Telegram, and, we can share this information. But this is a compilation of taking certain moving averages to get the price data and the momentum of the derivatives market. And so the derivatives market is super important because it lets us know how much leverage do people have to play with, and when are they going to be selling more, or doing more puts, saying, hey, I believe that the price will be going down, versus making more calls, calling for, hey, options for this thing to go up during a certain direction. So it's really nice because we've been able to really hone in on some really good value. So like same thing, looking at the opportunity cost, looking at, okay, when are going to be the best times to capture value for the asset that we want, which we know is crypto. So when we see that this is on the extreme fearful side, so times like here, here, up here, and even times where we were here, right? These are going to be the times where you say, hey, I really want to think about doing my DCAing. I really want to think about doing my, allocating, because why? Majority of people are not, trying to get call options, right? They're not expecting the market to go down. So we're going against, the market. And so, with that being said, what we find is these are the really good DCA opportunities. But when we really touch this line, so this one level, this is where you can really get the butter from the duck, those really good DCAs, right? So like we're talking about early November of 2023, like you're DCAing in your alts, guess what? You're a happy person because, Pulse Chain has gone exponential since then. Things like Say or Celestia or, even some certain dog coins, right? New shit coins that are out now, these things have popped off, because people are coming with a little bit more confidence in the market with more puts, right? And then so this also lets us know the extreme overheated time. So times like, okay, now we're getting into the back end of, the bull market of last cycle. So this is, October of 2020, early 2021, and Q1 of 2021. This is when all the altcoins are ripping, all the altcoins. And so with that being said, we want to look at the round trip going from extremely bearish to extremely bullish. And what does that tell us? Maybe an opportunity for us to start to think about taking some type of profit. So knowing the season, knowing the rotations of capital, knowing what people are doing in the derivatives markets, this is what this ratio tells us here. And so one thing I can do, we can just pop on, I don't know, let's pop on Ethereum. Boom. And we'll put that on log scale. And so what we find is when we see this coming to the lower, like this coming to like the lower levels, we'll see tops in the market, right? This comes to the lower parts of this level here, of this metric, we'll see this being towards the top of the market. So, and this is not the exact top. We're talking about span of 6-8 months, give or take, really being able to identify the top basin of the prices being overheated. So this ratio is incredible for that. All right, the grand finale, the last ratio. So majority of us are holding altcoins. So we want to know, when are the alts going to outpace Bitcoin? When are we going to go into that alt season? When are all of us going to become mega millionaires? Some of us may already be millionaires, or some of us may want to get to our first million. So how do we make that next level? Basically put an extra zero onto our net worth. This ratio that I'm about to show right here. So, but then again, you have to be invested. You have to be doing your due diligence in getting, your assets when this ratio is in your favor. So this is Bitcoin versus Total 3. Same thing. Trust me, nobody is talking about it. And the reason why you're watching this is because you know that we can extract the data, stuff that actually is going to help you. So Bitcoin versus Total 3. So we all know that after all the information that we went through, crypto is the fastest horse in the race. Then it's the tech sector. Then you're going to find just stocks in general, then commodities, then bonds. And then from there, holding your fiat currency is just the worst. So that's the scale. Now, outside of that, we need to look at crypto in specifics. Like you have Bitcoin, then you have Ethereum, then you have the rest of everything else. So Total 3 is the compilation of all the other coins within crypto outside of Bitcoin and Ethereum. So a couple things. When this thing is going up, that means Bitcoin is outpacing everything in market cap. And essentially, Bitcoin is the hottest show in town. But then we have these jolts of coming to the downside. That's when alts are ripping and running. And these are when you find your alt seasons. And we can't wait for that, right? And so guess what? It's loading. It is on the way. And it's going to be a beautiful thing. So The alt seasons, and when you had, and so what helps us understand this momentum is looking at the Heikin-Ashi candles. And what makes it even easier to see if we put this on the monthly chart. So this is giving us, 2 cycles worth of information here. So being able to catch, 2 alt seasons through and through. So what we find is, I'll highlight them, is when this same thing, the second quantity, so all the altcoins on the right side of the ratio, when those are outpacing Bitcoin, we're going to see this chart going down. So that's going to signify by these candles here. Boom. And it's crazy because it's literally like, and we can capture that one there. It's literally not a long time, y'all. Like the true alt season. Yeah, we have these blips on the radar. Like, like the past couple of months, we have some alts popping past Bitcoin, gaining more, market cap and percentage gain. But we're talking about when everything is outperforming Bitcoin. And so you want to be a person that is investing when Bitcoin is killing it and the alts aren't, and selling when the alts are killing it and Bitcoin ain't doing much of nothing, or the alts are just outpacing Bitcoin like tenfold. So the alt seasons look like these time periods here. Boom. All right. So let's go through it. And how can we substantiate this? Just look at any altcoin or just look at Bitcoin. But I would say look at your favorite altcoin that has been around. I would say just looking at Ethereum through these past 2 cycles can really give you the time periods where the altcoins gain the most percentage. And, this is something to really think about. So with that being said, right now we're in the middle of the pack. So we have not gotten to an altcoin season, but we want a flush down with this. And let's make this make sense. We want this thing over a span. And what do you notice? These are large candles. And so it's a monthly chart. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4 months of just, we're talking about pure euphoria. We're talking about things that are going up 100% in a week. I remember when Ethereum had a month where it went up like 150% in a month. I was like, whoa, in a month, And then so, we want to experience these time periods here of large candles. And in this case, going to the downside, but meaning the altcoins are severely outpacing Bitcoin. And so what we can see is, let's pop up like Ethereum, for example. So with the ETH, and we'll look at that. And log. You know what? We'll look at this in a little bit different way, because I think actually looking at the candles will help us out. So we'll add the Ethereum chart and new pane. All right. So it's not giving, because I don't know if you guys remember, but this was a crazy time. You know what? Let's just actually go back and forth between the charts, because I really want to show the full chart with this ratio. All right. We want this to be candles. So just doing some quick. All right. So this thing is so expensive, can't even catch it all. All right, there we go. All right. So, looking at this ratio, kind of going back and forth, let me show you guys this chart here. So Ethereum during this time, and remember what we're talking about. We're talking about when the altcoins are just severely outpacing Bitcoin, and we're going to put this on the weekly. So we have these time periods where, okay, cool. Yeah, Ethereum's going up, but like, are you seeing these large candle bodies? And let's just use those Heikin-Ashi candles again. Like these large candle bodies where it's just like going crazy, ripping and running. And this is what the alt season looks like. Not so much this sideways chop, and even not so much early on in the I guess you can say the cycle, but really where the real money is made are from the people that invest down here, and they take their profits up here. And then so we can use this ratio. For example, we see like this thing is ripping and running and kind of peaking out in January of 2018. And so coming back here, January of 2018, that's where we see it. So let me go back and show you that chart. So y'all see that, right? January 2018, that's when we kind of see, hey, the altcoins are kind of hitting that level to where they, typically start to fade out. But you've had incredible like round trips. So from coming from here to here. So we're looking at from the time period of October, because it's touching, like it's really touching the top of this channel from July. So from July of 2017, but especially November through December of 2017, Ethereum is just killing it, right? So same thing. We'll go and really look at this from July of 2017 to December. And so this is letting us know this is when alt season is ripping and running, because not just Ethereum, right? During this time, Ethereum is, coming in on its last, 5x. But the thing is about investing before this round trip. So before this time period. So before these months. So kind of coming back to the example, like if you're a person and this is, the total 3, we weren't able to get the data. It doesn't show data before July of 2017. But if you can just imagine, what this would look like, it'd probably be where Bitcoin is still outpacing. So let's see if we can draw that. Like what it would look like with Bitcoin still outpacing, it'd probably look something like this, right? Because, altcoins weren't really such a huge thing, especially when it comes to market cap in like 2014, 15, all that kind of stuff. Once 16 and 17 kind of hit, that's when altcoins really started to gain some dominance. So, but that's what it would look like. So the key is, being a person that is invested, invested during a time, one, we're in a bear market, but then during a time where we're Bitcoin, they may say that, hey, Bitcoin is the best asset and that narrative is coming around. Okay, sure. Yeah, you believe that. Sure. Keep stacking those alts, because the time period of doing a round trip, so either going from here to here, or even from the mid-range from here and making new lows, or even just getting back to the bottom part of the channel, that can happen. And so let me, just make it plain. So round trip, going from here to here, that's what you're looking for, being invested before that point. So being invested during all of this time. So for example, from June of 2019, and you had plenty of time, even till about COVID, right? But then when you really start to see this move right here, you don't want to be a person just freshly trying to put capital into alts, So same thing. It's cool. Like you can accumulate these alts, right? Plenty of time. But when you start to see the big candles rush down to the bottom of this metric, that's how you know it's alt season, And so, even looking at Ethereum from looking at this time period. So we're taking this candle here from December of 2021 to, where it did the round trip to May of 2021. What does that look like for Ethereum, the last cycle? And what that looks like is same thing, incredible gains through the time period. So we'll go from December of 2021, right? And do you notice how large the candle bodies start to get, right? Here it's like, okay, cool. It's like still very boring, but this is when things really get exciting. I don't know if y'all can tell the difference between these candle bodies. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit tighter. But like what this looks like for Ethereum, this is like incremental. Cool. Like this is kind of what we're experiencing now with like some incremental gain. Nothing too crazy, but still nice. But then when these candles start to rise, this is the alt season, December of 2021. You see how large this candle is, right? And, and we're talking all the way to May. So really using these other ratios can really let you know where you're at in the cycle, when an alt season is, everything, everything when it comes to being a savvy investor on a knowledge front, ratios can tell you the picture, not someone on YouTube, not someone on the news, simply just looking at the ratios. And this is a time period where, Ethereum went up 6x. So if you had $1,000, your $1,000 turns into 7,000. If you have, 10,000, then it turns into 70,000. Let's say if you're a person that put in that 100K, right? And then it turns into 700K during this time. But it gets better because if you invest before the actual real alt season comes into play. So, same thing, looking at the other ratio. So, for example, let's say you're using we can choose, we went through plenty of them. Let's say you're using the ACWX. So looking at the global economic status of these other countries versus, what, the United States is doing. So if you're investing, let's say in Ethereum, when this gets to the bottom of this channel, okay, cool. You can get the full move, right? So let's actually take, what is this? This is S&P. Let's turn this to ETH. And so this is how you can use ratios from somewhere else to, basically hone in on crypto specifically and get the full move. So we'll do ETH, boom, and we'll put this on log scale. So, you can apply this to any time. So for example, right, if you would have used this ratio, use this yellow vertical line, cool, January 2021. All right, cool. If I had to just be a person that's just wanted to just shoot in the dark, just one buy, one shot, one kill. All right, cool. This would have been an opportune time, January 2020. And you would have probably known, okay, cool, the top of this ratio, July 2021. Okay, maybe I'll take some profits. So let's say you're that guy that put in 100K, one shot, one kill. I'm not advocating for that, but if you had to do it like that, using ratios could help you do that better. And then so going from, let's call it January of 2020 to, April of 2021, what does that look like for an investor? So what do we say? January 2020. All right. We're kind of already on it. So January 2020. So we'll do the measurement from here. And let's actually do the time and price measurement. So we're looking at, let's see, time and price, date and price. So January 2020, we'll do January 1st, like beginning of the year, similar to the time period we're in, right? So we're talking April 2021. So not the exact top, but still, right? You can still capture the majority of the move. That's what the goal should be. You don't have to get it perfect, but you do want to capture majority of the move. So 18x on your capital, not half bad. So that 100K, times that by 18, do the math, not half bad. 1.8 million. I think a lot of people will be happy with that. And there's other things to get a little bit more particular on how to hone in a little bit more on these tops here. So I say all that to say ratios are super important. We're done with the charts for now. Ratios are super important, you guys. If you guys stuck through this stream, all 8 of you, and we'll catch some people on the replay, but you guys are the people that legitimately have a huge edge over everybody else. Because one, you understand the mindset, you understand how the ratios can be to your benefit, and you know what type of actions you need to take when the ratios are at certain points. And that's investing in a nutshell. This is not something that you just simply hear on an average YouTube stream. Like I put some time into being able to present this to you guys so y'all can just easily understand it. And a lot of people are not going to give out this information, this alpha, I'm not really here to try to be popular. I just want to give you guys what's going to be helpful for your journey, as I'm doing the same thing for myself, So, ratios are a great thing. And I really believe that if you guys hone in with this information, take it to heart, watch the stream back maybe twice, 3 times. By the time we get to that, the top of that bull market, you're going to be in a sober mind state to be like, oh man, I already know what to do. I have everything that I need to see. I've already experienced this whole move. It's simple to take profits at that point, because what we're talking about in the Telegram is we'll be talking about, especially over the next couple months, is, hey, what does it look like to DCA out the market? It's very hard to do. People don't know how to do it well, and then they fumble the bag. So we don't want to be people that are fumbling the bag, really, truthfully. So appreciate you guys for coming through, man. A lot of good information. Let's see, we got nobody's putting out game like this. Hey, I appreciate it, but hey, I'm only as good as the unit, right? Like I know investing is a solo sport, but investing with people that are going in the same direction as you is that much more fulfilling and a lot more fun, to be honest. Like I gotta have these conversations with somebody, not just myself at night, like So you guys being on par with this is gonna make it fun for all of us. Dan T, serious, right? Hey, it's serious. It can only be serious because that's what it has to be if you want to be free. Like that is it. Like you've got to get serious about finance if you want to take your time back. It's really as simple as that. Appreciate it. Yes, sir. Thank you guys for coming. Let's see. Yeah, those ratio comparisons are pretty creative. Yeah, and that's the best part. Your mind can literally create the ratio. Like every ratio that I presented, I thought about it first. What are things that are important? Like the one when it comes to like new homes versus like wages, that came to mind first because that's what everybody does. Everybody tries to work and everybody tries to buy a new home. So what does that look like for the person trying to do that? Right? So, these things are anybody can create the ratio and it's up to you to understand it though. So that's why we went through so many different ones. Let's see here. Will you do a stream on how to scale out profits via LP while earning fees? Yes. And this is more advanced. And these are things that we talk about in the Telegram chat. So I highly, highly, highly encourage you guys to jump in. It's at a modest price point. Like it's like pennies on the dollar really for like what you get out of it, truthfully. So highly encourage you guys to come on in. I'll put the link in there in a bit. But yes, being it because that's a even more savvy way to be able to extract value from an ecosystem without having to do a spot market buy. And being able to position that liquidity correctly is key. Been there through the whole bear and heading into my first bull, been accumulating the whole time. So you're on the right side of the ratio, my friend. You're on the right side of the ratio. Now the question is, will you maintain through the bull, and then at the top, what will you do? And then in the next bear, will you manage those? Those realized gains. And so this is like managing wealth is a whole job. It's not something that you just know how to do overnight. So for me, it's been a great journey of learning how to after you've received your reward, understand your risk to reward profile and how to hedge yourself even more. But then when opportunities come, identify them correctly and pounce on them, at the most opportune time. So cool, man. Look, I appreciate y'all for coming through. We've had a lot of info, and last thing, I gotta shield myself just briefly. So with that being said, I have a lot of free stuff here on the site. Let me pop that up real quick. vaultsofcrypto.com. So we'll go there, kind of tour it just briefly, not too long. So we got vaultsofcrypto.com. And we got plenty of things. If you guys want to look specifically at the market, you don't have to always go to CoinGecko. We got everything in one spot. So what we got here, we can look at the complete, market, just let it load up for us. So looking at everything in its market cap. So go through, seeing the price change for the day for Bitcoin, Ethereum, all that good stuff. Whatever coin you like, we got it here. Outside of that, see what's ripping and running for the day. So Celestia is coming up now. I've talked about Celestia a couple streams. That's something that's a newer coin that I've been allocating to over the last 3 months, give or take. And it's new blockchain or new use case on the Cosmos blockchain. I'll say that. And yeah, let's see what else it has here in the future. Take a look at it. Go do your research. What is ripping and running? This is all other crap. Hey, Kusama up 5%. Interesting. Okay. But outside of that, we got a heat map. So the heat map is extremely helpful because, we want to look at, hey, are we positive for the day? Are we negative for the day? And then, we can zoom in and say, hey, what in particular is doing what? So all that good stuff. What we got? Nothing going too crazy. We got Hex just kind of, meander-throwing over the last, day. But, the Hex ecosystem, man, Potion ecosystem is getting going. We're actually going to finish with that before we go. But yeah, and also, coins that, we've talked about here on the channel, things that typically continue to show us some type of hype, or I guess you can say network growth. So net worth growth is the name of the game. So, Metis, I've been talking about Metis, even, when I was going on stream with Charlie and Miguel a couple years ago, or in 2022, just talking about, hey, the growth there, things that I was seeing early on. But same thing, if you were investing in this before October, you've been able to get Metis for like talking what, $40, give or take, $50. So looking good there. Yeah, looking at all these coins, talking about Celestia, $19. There were some DCA opportunities around like $13, give or take. So yeah, come and look at some of these things here. Also, look at some of the new top stories. So like I said, paying attention not to just crypto, but looking at everything. So things over the weekend, what is the DXY doing? Right, talking about how Microsoft became the world's largest company, dethroning Apple. It's good stuff to know. What is the ETF doing as far as inflows, all that good stuff. So come and get your stories, get your information here as well. So there's that. But then again, you can check up some on-chain data. So some on-chain data, one key metric I think is super important is to know the fear and greed. So we've actually popped into under 50 for fear. So that's, for the investor, that's actually a good thing. We want to be investing, pretty nicely once we get to like 25 or below. So we had that during the bear market. But looking at the inflows and outflows to exchanges, between Bitcoin, Ethereum, and UST or USDT, looking at the supply and profit for Ethereum. So this is going to be very, very important to pay attention to. Once we get to like 95% or higher for Ethereum, ding, 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 things are getting overheated. So remember that. Looking at the daily volumes for Ethereum. So we want to see, growth. So put this on a quarterly basis. And so we can see over the past quarter, things are trending in the right direction. Looking at the net flows for Ethereum. So a lot of good info on chain. Same thing, looking at the macroeconomics. So there's a lot of free stuff on here, y'all. Like a lot of free stuff. Looking at the economic calendar. So what's going on, and the way that you can, basically read this, how many bulls it has, it's going to let you know the importance of it. So something that has 3 bulls lets you know, okay, cool, I need to pay attention to this. So CPI in Europe is coming up, especially Germany, the United States, having some information coming up here. So manufacturing index. So keeping up to date with that, understanding what's going on with China. So China GDP, that's coming up here for Q4. They're going to be reading that off. So, these are key dates, key things to know, and that's coming up for tomorrow. So, I'm sorry, Tuesday. That's going to be the 16th. So know what the Fed's fund rate is. Know what the inflation rate is. Like all of this stuff. What is the M2 money supply? First of all, go and learn, right? What does this even mean? And then come back to the chart. But if you're finding yourself like, man, I really don't know these topics, I have a whole section dedicated to just introducing the basics. So basic terms. So here's the learn section. And this is going to give you all of like the crypto glossary that helps you understand the basics. So what is an address? What is an airdrop? All-time high, all-time low. What is an altcoin? Like all these things, right? What is a CBDC? What does that mean to me? DYOR, do your own research, understanding what is the DEX and the DApp. Like all this stuff is super, super helpful if you're just now learning, understanding the halvening and understanding, hey, what does it look like to hodl? The difference between a hot wallet and cold storage. What is issuance? So the inflation. What is hyperinflation just in general, right? A layer 2, like all of this stuff on here, come and get abreast to just get your just basic knowledge. What is a validator? Man, I got I got some validators for the Pulse Chain Network. Got my system right here to the right of me. So what is that? Helping you, confirm the consensus mechanism of a chain. So all this stuff is super helpful, but icing on the cake, we got to go and check out the Pulse Chain chart. So I have these charts specifically for the Pulse Chain ecosystem, because sometimes I know you're new, it's a little hard to find all this stuff. And looking nice. Okay. So Pulse Chain up 23% for the day. I like that. Let's go ahead and look at the chart. So, and this is like the quick and easy stuff. If you're on the go, you can just pull this up on your phone. So we got the Pulse Chain chart, looking at the transactions. If you want to look at PulseX, we got that too. Big wick right there. We'll see what that's all about. P-Hex is here too. So you can look into the whole post chain ecosystem, all the stuff that you need, all in one spot. And, with that being said, it's super easy. Like, how do you get access to not only this, but the other stuff? So behind the paywall, we have much more stuff. So tap the services tab and we have the Telegram chat, but it's not just, hey, buy this coin. Specifically, we're going over these concepts more in depth, like the whole stream of today. We're talking about, hey, what to do in terms of how we DCA out, liquidity pools, all that kind of stuff. Real analysis of the market, but then also getting a whole suite, a whole tool set of invite-only trading view indicators. And so, you guys have probably seen me use them from time to time. That really just help you evaluate and make those decisions just that much easier. So clicking the Join Now tab, and it'll bring you over to here. And pretty easy. Just sign up, quick and easy. Name, put your card information in, and typically within 24 hours, you'll get an email with the instructions on, getting the resources in the Telegram group, and then also in TradingView, getting access to those indicators. So super easy, y'all. Come on through. Would love to have you. And we're growing fast, you guys. Like, we're only going to 100 spots, and so the 100 people that are the most convicted, that's they'll take advantage of it. So good deal. Let me leave this link in the chat for those that are interested, and if not, then just keep consuming the free information. Boom. So there's a link if you guys want to be a part of the BFD gang. Let's go. Let's get it. Because what you get here is just a taste. So let's see. Anything else in the chat? All I'm seeing is just good stuff. Fire emojis. Let's get it. Let's go. We're coming up on 2.5 hours. So hey, this is what it takes, baby. This is discovery at its best. I love to think of it as discovering like what's under that stone, because really discovery is the first part of freedom. Like, you're thinking about anybody that's traveled or discovered a nation. Some people didn't do it the right way. Like, they're strong arm the people that are from there. But, at the end of the day, discovery is you discovering more of what's already inside of you. We all have the ability to have discipline. We all have the brain cells that have knowledge. But it's all about repeating it over and over again, Let's see. Let's talk about, let me see. Oh, okay. So let's talk about the ETF briefly. So, and we'll talk a little because K-Harp, we'll talk more about this in the group, but like to give like the basics of it, there was a lot of outflows from GBTC. So even though the first 2 days was about like $7 billion, volume, keyword volume, a good amount of that, majority of that was outflows. And that's why the Bitcoin spot price is down from where it was, prior to even any of the ETFs being approved. So I would think actual like net flows, we're looking at about like 700 million, because out of that 7 billion, like legitimately 6.5 million almost was outflows coming out of GTBs or GBTC. Now, the reason why that was because of that discount. People were able to buy, like before they convert to ETF, they would be able to buy that 50% on the dollar because it was a 50% discount to NAV. And so with that being said, the discount is not even like 3% anymore. It's like 1.5%. So they're just cashing in on that trade. It's just a cash and carry trade, just pretty basic, but that's to be expected. Now what we need to see is what's going to happen over the next month, 2 months. It takes time to mature, and typically you'll see somebody kind of snag some stuff on the discount as far as equity managers in terms of hedge funds and large corporations. So they don't do things on day one. Like, doing something on the day one of an ICO or IPO is never the smart move. If you've been in TradFi, you probably have heard that before. So, but that's a brief overview of everything going on with the ETFs. I mean, for us, we're not allocated towards that. We'd rather just have the asset, but the thing that's going to outpace Bitcoin are all the alts that we talk about briefly, every single day. So that's just kind of what it is. Let's see. Any other thoughts? Outside of that, post chain, ripping and running. So what I'll probably do next stream, probably tomorrow. Yeah, I'll hop on tomorrow. I'll do a stream on post chain tomorrow for those that want to come back and talk about that. But before that, got to talk about that with the BFD gang tonight. But so if you guys want to be a part of that conversation, y'all know what to do. Just go ahead and sign up. But yeah, post chain, they got some things coming. Some things going on. The God will bringing back some money over from the Ethereum side. And that's getting a lot of people excited. Richard Hart battling the SEC, getting people excited. A lot of this stuff is community driven. People are voting with their dollars based upon how they feel. And but nonetheless, the chain works. It does what it's supposed to do. And the PostX buy and burn is working in the holder's favor. Just know that. So cool. Thank y'all for coming. Nice long stream. It's been a while since we've done a stream this long, but it's definitely needed. If y'all don't have any other questions, I'll hold it for another 30 seconds. If y'all have a question, put it in the chat. If not, then we'll call it for the night or the day, wherever you're at. And once again, go Pack Go. We headed off to the next round of the playoffs. Let's get it. All right. Well, without further ado, man, I appreciate y'all. I'll be back tomorrow. Most likely we'll do a stream in the morning time. So we're probably looking at probably about like 10 hours from now. We'll be hopping back on stream. So click the notification bell so that way you know when it's up. And if you have not subscribed, please consider subscribing if you just want real good, unbiased data information, something that's going to help you grow your knowledge, that can help you grow your net worth so you can grow your confidence and then just grow in the category of freedom for yourself and your family. So, yeah, peace. Catch y'all on the next one.